Good evening. I'm Sarah Gravett. I'm the Acting Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research and Innovation at UJ, and it is my privilege to officiate tonight. Professor Kamala Naidu, Executive Dean, Faculty of Humanities, our very important person of the evening, Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp, our inductee, Prof. Lina Hankela, the respondent. She's a professor in religion studies at UJ. All our distinguished guests, all who have joined us online, Sanbonani, Goeienaand, good evening, Tobela. It is indeed a great honor and special privilege for me to welcome you to the Professorial Inaugural Lecture of Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp. As I do so, I wish to express a warm welcome to her loved ones, special guests, and colleagues. This is indeed a proud, joyful, and landmark moment for you all, for Professor Frahm-Arp, and for us here at UJ, for higher education in South Africa and beyond. The inauguration of professors is a public ceremony in which newly appointed professors are inducted into office by the Vice-Chancellor and deliver their inaugural address. The ceremony has its roots in the medieval university and serves multiple purposes. First, it is an expression of welcome and an entry for new professors joining the circle of colleagues who are already professors. Secondly, it provides a platform for professors to display their expertise in their discipline and to showcase their research. So professors profess, and we will hear Prof. Maria professing tonight. In the tradition subscribed to by many universities, assuming the role of the professor refers to the gown and the cap. Once we have listened to the inaugural address, the gown denoting the professorship will formally be assumed. Today we gather to witness Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp's entry into the illustrious community of scholars at our university. It celebrates her contributions to the discipline and ultimately her impact on society. Professors provide a university with its identity, character, academic legitimacy, and integrity. The inaugural lecture is a rite of passage following the confirmation of the appointment of a person as a professor. This evening, we will listen to Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp, and you heard that we said the cap and the gown denotes the entry into professorship. So tonight, the gown goes to town. What do we mean by this? That the power of the inaugural address lies in expertise being showcased beyond the corridors of the university, reverberating with society. In the past, several philosophers and scholars have defined universities using very narrow conceptualizations. For example, the search for truth, for universal knowledge, and even as instruments serving the purpose of the economy or being utilitarian in nature. Through our work and research at UJ, we hope that we can break out of these narrow conceptualizations and reflect on the university as contributing to the public good, working towards societal impact. What then is the role of the intellectual, of the professor as the intellectual? Edward Said in one of his articles defines the role of an intellectual as one who commands a vast knowledge of a specific discipline, one who is rigorous in the analysis of literature, who views being an intellectual as a vocation, and who functions as a kind of public memory to recall what is forgotten or ignored, to make the connections that are otherwise hidden, and to provide alternatives for mistaken policies. And I'm sure we will hear much of this tonight in Prof. Frahm-Arp's inaugural lecture. This evening, we will listen to Prof. Maria as one further step in the journey of being a professor. This is a journey which does not conclude once this lecture has been given. Notwithstanding, the inaugural lecture does create an opportunity for a self-reflective pause in the journey of the professor. Let me now invite the Executive Dean, Professor Kamala Naidu, to introduce Professor Maria Frahm-Arp. I thank you. Ria leboga, ngiyabonga, baie dankie.
Good evening, Sanibonani, Dumelang, and Goeienaand. Vice-Chancellor Functionary, Prof. Sarah Gravett, Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp, Mrs. Gentina Frahm-Arp, Mr. Raj Rajakanta, friends and family of Maria Frahm-Arp, discussant Professor Elina Hankela, fellow academics, and guests. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp, in case you don't know who she is. Prof. Maria Frahm-Arp studied psychology and religion studies at Wits, completing her undergraduate degree cum laude and winning the Dean's Merit Award in 1997 and 1998. She completed her honors degree cum laude, winning the University Council Merit Award Scholarship and Geffen J&R Award, and receiving a National Research Foundation Scholarship. She completed her MA degree in Religion Studies at Wits in 2000 cum laude, and E.P. Bradlow John Lemmer Award. She then received a United Nations Scholarship to do a Master's in Humanitarian Aid at Fordham University in New York in 2001. After receiving a British Commonwealth Scholarship, she completed a PhD in the Sociology of Religion at Warwick University under James Beckford. She returned to South Africa in 2006 and then took up a Mellon-funded PDRF at Wits between 2006 and 2008. From 2008 to 2012, she worked as a lecturer and then registrar at St. Augustine's College in Johannesburg. In 2008, she started a small charity with a friend called Soul Provider, and the charity now employs 23 people and gives out over 18 million meals to children at schools, creches, and orphanages. She was ordained as an Anglican priest in August 2011. In January 2014, she joined the Department of Religion Studies at UJ and was awarded a Humanities Teaching Excellence Award. In 2016, she was head of the department and won the Vice Chancellor's Teaching and Learning Award. The following year, she became the Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Humanities and was a finalist for the National Teaching and Learning Award. And in this year, she was rated as a C3 NRF researcher. In March 2018, she became the Executive Director of the Library and continues to serve the library in this position. In 2023, she was a finalist for the South African Women Leadership in Higher Education Trailblazer category. Maria has supervised 15 master's and PhD students to completion, and she's currently supervising 4 PhD students, co-supervising another 4, and supervising 2 master's students. She has been an external examiner for 23 masters and PhDs for universities in South Africa, Holland, England, and Zimbabwe. Her niche research area is exploring power dynamics within Pentecostalism in Southern Africa. She first worked on gender economics and power in Pentecostalism, but over the last 8 years, she has redirected her focus to explore the intersections of power, politics, economics, and Pentecostalism. Her work looks at the ways in which people understand their faith, the theologies that church leaders create and preach, and how this in turn shapes people's political, economic, and social behavior. She's the author of 2 books. Firstly, Professional Women in South African Pentecostal Charismatic Churches, published in 2010, and secondly, Into the Deep, Finding God in the Midst of Suffering, published in 2015. She has published over 32 peer-reviewed book chapters and articles and edited 2 books. She was elected as the first female president of the Association for the Study of Religion in Southern Africa in October 2017, and she was the guest editor of the December 2019 volume for the Journal for the Study of Religion, which focused on Pentecostalism in Africa. In 2021, she was elected as the first female editor of the JSR and continues to serve as its editor to date. And she's been asked over time to review about 42 articles in 17 different international journals and to review 11 books for Brill, Macmillan, Palgrave, and Routledge presses. Over the last few years, she's been asked to review 8 applications for NRF rating. She's presented 53 papers and keynote addresses at conferences, and in 2018, she won the Best Paper Award at the Gender and Sexuality Conference in Bangkok, Thailand. Within the library community, her work as a transformational leader has become highly recognized and valued. She has served on the board of Sabinet, the South African National Library and Information Consortium, and the OCLC, and she has just recently been nominated as the chairperson for the OCLC Global Leaders Committee. She served on the Academic Advisory Board for the WWIS and EBSCO since 2023. And since 2020, she has served on the Association of Commonwealth Universities Research Support Committee. So I thank you, and let's welcome Prof. Frahm-Arp with a round of applause.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, and a very warm welcome to friends and family and colleagues and students, and a special thank you to Prof. Sarah Gravett, who is the acting DVC for research, being here, and a very special thank you to Camilla Naidu, Professor, and our Dean in the Faculty of Humanities. And then also a very special thank you to Prof. Elena Hunkler for being the respondent and being here this evening. It's really such a pleasure to be with all of you and to share some of my ideas and some of the things that have been keeping me up at night and working over the weekends and make me in some ways an interesting person to have at a dinner party and in some ways incredibly boring. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about, or start rather, by saying a lot of different thank yous. This is not a thank you slide because the presentation has come to an end, but rather a thank you slide because there are lots of different people to thank. So a very big thank you to my colleagues at UJ. So many of you are here within the broader UJ community for your support, especially colleagues from the ELG. I've learned so much from all of you. And then to my colleagues within the Faculty of Humanities, thank you to all of you for the support, the encouragement, especially when the going got a little bit tough. And then a very big thank you to my colleagues in the library. You've all been amazingly supportive. Half the time you don't understand some of the big words that I use and why I use them, and you smile graciously and you let me just keep going, and you're always incredibly supportive of everything that I'm trying to juggle. So a very big thank you to you for all your support. And then thank you to my friends, and I know that there are so many people online, and it's wonderful to have you joining, particularly from the UK and other parts of South Africa. And then I just want to say a particular thank you to my friend Caroline and her brother James, who is here. And Caroline was the person who kind of got me through my PhD. I was living in the UK, and sometimes it was really dark, and I really didn't want to sit down in front of my computer. And my mother would tell me that the only way to do a PhD is the same way that you build a wall, one brick at a time, which means one word at a time. And that meant you had to sit down in front of the computer. But Caroline would inevitably send me an email. And that made it so much easier, because I knew if I sat down, I would open the email and I'd read the message from Caroline, and then that I don't want to sit down and do this, I would be able to get over that and get going. And then a very big thank you to my brother, who's been one of my big cheerleaders. My brother and I studied together for a lot of our undergraduate degrees and postgraduate degrees, and we used to have a song, I'm an alien, I'm an illegal alien, when things were going well. And then I went through the desert on a horse with no name was the song when things were going really badly. Have no idea why these songs were chosen. My brother has a memory like an elephant, and he would be able to tell you, but unfortunately he can't be here today. And then a very big thank you too to my cousin and all her support and for being here today, and my extended family. And then to my husband Raj, who is the person that brings endless amounts of coffee. And when we were in lockdown, this person would mysteriously come into the office, and I would get these lovely looking cups of coffee. And so somebody referred to it as Mr. Delivery. And then apparently there was a rumor that went through the library that I actually officially got coffees from Mr. Delivery. And now I have an even better barista at home who makes amazing coffee. So Raj, thank you for everything. And also to my in-laws and my brother-in-law who are watching online. And thank you so much for all your support. And then, of course, to my parents. My mother has been very long-suffering. As a little child, I absolutely adored school. I couldn't wait to get to big school, and my poor mother had to make me a dress that looked like a school uniform. And when I got to school, I was not disappointed. Learning was amazing. But then I hit a little problem. I ended up being terribly dyslexic. And so initially I masked it by going from having a really nice handwriting to having really messy handwriting, because I thought, well, you know, doctors and important people write with really messy handwritings, and everybody seems to be able to think that's okay. So if I just write with a messy handwriting, they won't know if it's an O or an A or an E, and it should be fine. Well, it didn't fool the teachers. So my mom spent hours working with me and helping me to be able to learn to read and write properly. Quite useful if you want to do a PhD. And then my dad, who was also always very encouraging, and especially when I said I wanted to go into academia, said, yeah, I can see that. Enjoy writing books. I don't think he understood what went into writing a book. So to everybody, thank you so much for all the support, all the encouragement, all the love, and I really appreciate your being here this evening. So one of the things that I find very interesting is, why do people study what they study? What sparks off their interest in their area of study? So I have a very particular story of what got me interested in Pentecostals, because as you heard, I'm an Anglican priest, and in many ways I am very, very far from any type of Pentecostalism in my own practice. But in the 1990s, the Toronto Blessing was blazing its way through South Africa and the rest of the world. It comes from Toronto and Canada. And the big thing was people were coming together, they were praying in tongues, and there was this lovely loud music, and then people were being slain in the spirit, which is why these people are lying on the floor, because they've been slain in the spirit. And I just had a completely different experience. Because as a 16-year-old, I got very sick, and I was sick in bed for 4 years. And for a long time, nobody knew what was wrong with me. And then they finally thought that I had a type of tick bite fever, and they started to treat that with very high doses of antibiotics. And so my Christian experience was very much one of contemplation, of silence. I was reading people like Richard Rohr and Thomas Merton and Henry Nouwen, and they were the very furthest from, you know, telling you that you are going to be prayed over and healed. And then I finally get to have a diagnosis that actually now finally works. And then I had many relapses, and I spent some time at university, and then time being sick at home for another year, and then back at university. And then when I was doing my PhD, they discovered that now all the medicine that I was taking had caused an autoimmune disease, so I spent some more time in bed, and always back into places of silence. So in many ways, I'm fascinated by the rhetoric of these churches that is so full of energy and finding God in the noise and the loudness, when my own experience has been so different. my autoimmune disease got worse, and when I was 40, I spent another year in bed once again. I spent a lot of time. I spent about 8 years in bed. Bed and I know each other very well. We're good friends. And again, places of silence, places of why does God not heal us immediately? And so my fascination with these Pentecostal churches started because my friends were having such a different experience. So just to put it in context, Pentecostal churches, one of the biggest places where they started was in Azusa Street in downtown Los Angeles. That's the picture with the car in it. But in about 1908, we have the first Pentecostals starting in the mining camps here in Johannesburg. And one of the big hallmarks of the Pentecostal movement was not just that people were praying in tongues, and this was a sign that you had been baptized in the Holy Spirit, but also that people were being encouraged to move away from drinking and gambling and womanizing and actually spend time with their families and actually invest in healthy living and actually live a sober life. And many people reported all sorts of amazing healings. You can be a little bit skeptical here and say, well, yes, if you're not drunk every night, you might experience some healing. But for the people that went to these churches, it was very real. And lots of healing also in family relationships. So what is it that I want to talk about tonight? So one of the things that has been really interesting about the Pentecostal movement has been its relationship to money. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about how I have been tracking these churches over the last 20 years, focus a little bit on how they talk about women, how they talk about politics, and then how they talk about money. But all of this leads one, and you will see as I get towards the end, to start to ask some sort of questions around the morality of the way these churches engage with money. And so I'm going to then engage with questions of moral economy as a framework to think about these churches, and then help us to maybe ask questions around should there be different types of moral orientation that we accept within the world. So I begin by looking at the Pentecostal charismatic type churches. These are churches that started in the 1970s in America. These are some of the most famous of their preachers. And really, this is the word of faith movement. It's health and wealth if you have enough faith. In South Africa, Ray Macaulay, who passed away a few days ago, was one of the biggest proponents of this type of Christianity. He started Rhema Bible Church. But in the late 1990s, Grace Bible Church in Soweto became a real center of this type of Christianity. Grace Bible Church had started in the 1980s and was really a church that emerged within the emerging new South Africa and all its possibilities. And people started to ask questions, was this a new type of Puritan Christianity that we were seeing? For my PhD, I looked at Grace Bible Church, and this is Moses Sono and his wife Gege, and Grace Bible Church, but also what is now called Every Nation, and in those days was His People, and looked at these two churches and why were people flocking to these churches? And was this a new type of Puritan Christianity that was re-emerging? The churches were teaching people that it was really important to study, to develop yourself, to work hard. Hard work and faith would get you where you wanted to be. You also needed to have a healthy and good lifestyle. You should spend time with God. And the big focus was to have a nuclear family. So as myself and others, which I've listed here, looked at these churches, one of the things we all noticed was that the churches were offering people a way to navigate modernity, neoliberalism, capitalism, and the urban setting. But what about this was making it so attractive? My work in the 2000s looked particularly at young professional Black women. And one of the big things the churches offered were business networks. So the women would tell me that what they really appreciated about the church was not just the motivational sermons that encouraged them and told them that they could do whatever it is they wanted to do, but also these business networks where you learned how to manage your money, how to manage a side hustle. You learned how to invest some money. There were lots and lots of self-development workshops, which were really about teaching soft skills, how to be assertive, how to speak out in business, how to dress correctly, how to manage your time. The prayer groups gave them connection with other people, and the Bible studies helped them to feel as though they were really learning about their faith and what was important about their faith in the world today. So thinking about this, I started to engage more with the work of Pierre Bourdieu and came to argue that what we see in these churches is a kind of habitus, a worldview that is created, in which 4 types of capital are being exchanged. People are gaining economic capital, yes, through their work, but they're also learning a lot of social capital. In other words, the networks of people that they make. And lots of people would tell me that I got a job because I met somebody at work. And many of these churches would put adverts up in their church foyers saying that we are advertising and we're looking for somebody in this particular field, whatever it might be. But they also gained this emotional capital. So the emotional and cultural capital of learning what to say, how to speak, etc. And all of this got translated into varying types of symbolic capital. Because these churches were also very big into recoding symbols of capitalism. So the idea was that the Gucci handbag was a symbol of your success. This BMW circa 2004 was one of the things that everybody was aspiring to. And of course, everybody wanted to get married because the nuclear family was the ultimate symbol of success. So just to remind you, the idea of habitus is a way that a group of people see something. And these churches were creating this kind of habitus. And it was very much about the middle class. In 2023, I examined a PhD by Ngoma, and she built on my earlier work to make the argument that this habitus has extended even more into the black middle class. And so with this also came dispositions towards money. This included tithing towards the church, investing in yourself, and also believing that you, through God's grace, would become successful in the capitalist economy. But I was also interested in what constructs of being a woman were being created in these churches. So there's a famous book by Brasco, which was published in the late 1990s, in which she argued that women went to these churches because they told their husbands to stop drinking, stop gambling, invest in the family, etc. But what I noticed was that these young women were going to these churches because they were telling them that it was good to be a career woman. One of the articles that has been cited the most, which I wrote, was called Sex, Singleness, and the Dream of Marriage, in which these churches were really encouraging women to continue to dream that they would ultimately find the perfect husband. But while they were waiting for this husband, they could be successful in the world of work. They could go and move into the suburbs. They could live on their own. That was exciting. Then I did some research with a group of honors students in which we looked at the ZCC, we looked at women from Assemblies of God and women from every nation. And what we found here was that as much as these places were supportive and encouraging, they were also places of surveillance. So as Foucault would say, there was a surveillance culture that was going on. In other words, if you started to complain about the church, you were quickly brought back into place. If your husband wasn't doing what he should be doing, then we would pray for the evil of drink or whatever to come out of your husband. But no ways would we encourage you to leave your husband. And you were not allowed to complain about the rules and regulations of the church. Now, For a lot of women, this was very helpful and very supportive. And building on Mahmoud's 1999 work, I argued that this kind of piety gave them structure and order, and women really resonated with that. But I've done longitudinal work with every nation, and I'm going to call this lady Leslie, argues and says, if your husband is having an affair, then you need to pray for him. You can't, leave him. That is not what the Bible teaches, Leslie ultimately left the church, and with that she left her friends, she left her support system, and it was really incredibly devastating for her. So as much as these churches give structure and order for some people, for others, this can be quite abusive. And part of the problem is because these churches don't have a theodicy. They don't have a theology that helps you to think about and cope with what happens when things go wrong. What happens when the blessings don't flow all the time? Building on that, I was very interested to see what would happen in the 2014 elections. So some of you may know, Ray Macaulay set up something called the National Religion Leaders Council in 1999, and this really became the mechanism of religion that was closest to politics. In 2007, if you didn't know, Zuma became a pastor. And if you didn't know, he then used religion really, really well. And he told people that if you didn't vote for the ANC, you would basically go to hell. So, in the 2014 elections, what was going on? At Grace Bible Church, they invited loads of different politicians to come and speak. Different politicians from the EFF, from the ANC, they were all there. Every Sunday was a different political sermon. At every nation, they had heated online discussions about politics. They didn't discuss it in the preaching sections, but social media was blowing up in 2014, and they were discussing the politics of the day. And then in a small church called Hallelujah Ministries, the pastor told me that they knew that the ANC was going to win in their ward, and so they invited ANC people to speak every Sunday, because that meant after the elections, they were going to get support from the ANC. So what we started to see was a real engagement with Pentecostalism and politics. But following this, I did a study with a colleague from Harvard University where we looked at 100 different churches in the Gauteng area. And I argue that what we see are three different types of prosperity theology. The one, what I call abilities prosperity, which is epitomized by a church like Rivers. And so, yes, that over there is a church building. Looks like a shopping mall, and it looks more like a shopping mall inside. Achievements prosperity and miracle prosperity. And miracle prosperity, this young man is professor, yeah, like me, Lesego Daniels, but he got his professorship from an American university. And he now heads up Rabboni Church and makes millions. So, how was this influencing the next elections? So in the 2019 elections, we saw that abilities prosperity. This is a sort of prosperity where the argument is that you are going to be prosperous if you develop your own abilities. And then you invest in yourself, you grow yourself, you learn, and God will bless you. And of course, you have to work really hard. Then achievements prosperity, which is more what a Grace Bible Church began to become, is more about celebrating the small wins. So as a hairdresser, if you get one new client in a month, that is an achievement. It is a sign of prosperity. And then we saw the emergence of what I call miracle prosperity, where basically the prophet prays for you and you have to do nothing, just have enough faith and give enough money, and then the miracles will flow. And these three different types of prosperity also related very differently to politics. So abilities, prosperity, like Rivers, Rayma, became very critical of government. And Ray Macaulay sent out or published many, many different articles now criticizing Zuma. Places like Grace Bible Church had minimal engagement with politicians. Nobody was invited to come and preach. They encouraged people to vote and to pray, but that was it. And Miracle Prosperity did not give politics even the slightest engagement. 1 or 2 churches said go and vote on the day of elections, but the big thing is pray. So we started to see a different type of Pentecostalism emerge. And this is prophetic Pentecostalism, which is really around state capture and this idea of people's sense of economic hopelessness. And these prophets also reimagined the Christian idea of a prophet, not as somebody fighting for social justice, but as somebody fighting for miracles to happen because of their connection with God. So Rabboni Church is the church that became famous for telling people to eat grass. And thankfully, they moved on from that, but have continued to perform many different miracles. These miracle prophets have been able to raise people from the dead. They are called men of God because they are directly anointed by God, and their big power is to be able to drive out the evil spirits that are holding people back in some kind of poverty, sadness, or in some type of spirit marriage. So before we become too judgmental of these churches, let's have a look at what goes on in some of these churches. So here is a testimony from Rabboni. It was online, and it's an older lady who is saying, Mina, I wasn't getting no grant money. My grant, it was dry. There was nothing to eat, and the children were hungry. Mina, I prayed in Nkosi. I gave my last 100 rand, my last 10 rand to Papa, just like he said from the widow in the word. Then Papa prayed, and then the money came. The money is full. For this woman, like so many of the women and men, but particularly women that I have engaged with, that I have read testimonies of, these miracle churches are very important because there are 2 powers in their lives, the grant system and God. And the granny brings in the most amount of money into a multi-generational household where nobody works. So how can she get more money? Her only agency is to get God to do something different. So for these women, it makes perfect sense to give the last of their money. They're going to get more money next month from the government, but how will they get more money to actually live on? Change the mind of the government, and the only one powerful enough to do that is the prophet and God. Of course, these churches have also been known for the awful types of sexual abuse that have happened, and I'm not sure what's happening with my power. Oh, cool. You're not seeing anything. And so I did an article looking at Cheryl Zondi. I'm not going to spend time on that because we're going to run out of time. And the next thing is that some of these churches, like Rabboni, have become fully online churches. So during COVID, Rabboni went from quite a small church to now being a massive international church with hundreds and thousands of followers who all attend online, and the prophet prays for you. And through 7-hour services 5 times a week, God blesses you. There's real dedication here. But these people have the service playing in the background, and then they all have their cameras and their phones on, and you see them interacting in their homes with the church, and the whole thing is a kind of lifestyle, as the church is part of their everyday. But I have done lots of TV programs, TV series, radio interviews, and everybody always says, but this is so morally outrageous. What is the ethics? They are giving all of this money. So how do we think about moral economy? I don't want to spend too much time looking at this, But basically, there are different ways in which we have thought about moral economy, and it has its origins within Christianity and the idea that God is ordering the world in some kind of a moral way. But how we think about moral economy and these churches? Well, firstly, Courier is saying to us that we need to be careful about our sense of morality, of what we hold to be right and wrong, because context matters. One of the others is Bolton and Glazier, who argue that different people experience the world differently, and so will experience morality in different ways. And finally, Sayer is saying that actually your moral dispensation, or disposition rather, is also affected by your economic force. So sometimes the giving of lots of money appears as though you are being the angel come down to do good things, but sometimes that's not actually being very helpful. So to question all these attitudes that we have towards morality. And so as we think about morality and these churches, I found this work by Koenig and Nkotso Fidela really helpful to think with. Basically, what they are suggesting is that we should think of new networks of what we consider moral ways of behaving, and even perhaps different moral orientations. And so when we look at these churches, I'm arguing that both the Pentecostal charismatic churches and the prophetic churches, in all their different types of prosperity theology, are pro and unquestioning of the neoliberal capitalist market economy. And perhaps this is one of their blind spots. They all say that they offer tools and mechanisms for people to navigate these systems, but do so in very different ways. The pastors and prophets are seen as the symbols of success. So the more successful they are, the more people feel encouraged to go to these churches. Within these churches, we see that people have a degree of agency. Within Pentecostal charismatic Christianity, it's about living within your budget. It's about investing in yourself. And it's about making sure that you give 10% of your wealth to the church. But within the prophetic Pentecostal churches, these women believe that they have just as much agency. Their agency is to cry out to God to change their situation. Their agency is to give their money to prove their faithfulness so that God will change their situation. So in conclusion, what I have talked about are the lived realities of believers. These churches create worldviews or habitus and dispositions which help people to understand and navigate neoliberal capitalism. There are different types of Pentecostalism, and they offer different ways of understanding what it is to be a good Christian woman. This works for some and doesn't work for others. They all have different ways of understanding money and what is a morally good way to use money. Perhaps where our conversation needs to move forward in is to begin to see if we can start to have more conversations between prosperity theologies in their different forms and liberation theologies, and perhaps find some way for us as a Christian community to find a way that is just and merciful so that everybody can walk in this world in a way that they can survive, thrive, and become the best they are. Thank you.
Vice Chancellor Functionary, Professor Sarah Kravitz, Executive Dean of Humanities, Professor Camilla Naidu, Professor Maria Frahm-Arp, the star today, everybody in the room and online, good evening, Sanbonani, Dumelang. It's a true honor to be given the opportunity to say a few words today in response to Professor Maria Frahm-Arp's inaugural lecture. To me, Maria is a colleague and a friend, a fellow academic, and a companion in navigating both academia and life. So to be invited to stand here today and to have a chance to celebrate your scholarship with you, Maria, and with everyone here in the room and online is a privilege. In your lecture, you drew on your doctoral research that focused on the experience of young, professional Pentecostal women in Johannesburg and Soweto. Your work on Pentecostal churches' engagement with South African elections, your analytical work on the types of prosperity theologies that inform these churches and people called Pentecostals, and more. As you walked us through your past and present research into Pentecostalisms in South Africa, you painted the big picture of how this complex and multifaceted movement has developed and changed, and both informed and been informed by the political and socio-economic context of post-apartheid South Africa. You weave together a fascinating story of theologies, people of faith, and religious institutions within their socio-political environment, connecting phenomena, ideas, and theories in a way that allows those listening to you or reading your work to see the big picture, to understand better what is really going on, characterizes your academic work. This skill and way of being, weaving, also characterizes your presence in seminars and in supervision sessions with students. I've sat so many times in your office with a student that we'd supervise together, drinking great coffee, and seen you come to life as you connect the dots and show how the discussed phenomenon links to other ideas, theories, and trajectories. Drawing on your vast knowledge and expertise, social scientific tools that allow you to look at faith from the outside, and theological tools that locate you right within the world of faith. And also on your curiosity and creativity and the drive to see how it all falls together. As your lecture too illustrated, you have made a number of important contributions to the debate on Pentecostalism as one of the leading scholars in the field in South Africa. Among these, I want to pause for a brief moment to appreciate your highly useful typology of prosperity theologies that you call abilities, achievements, and miracle prosperity. While the theoretical edge of your argument that underpins this typology helps us understand the world better, the rootedness of the typology in a solid empirical data set drawn from a number of Pentecostal churches gives it credibility, and this is something that characterizes your work. Based on my own experience of conducting fieldwork in different kinds of Pentecostal churches, this prosperity theology typology was indeed more helpful in making sense of how these churches relate to one another and how they differ than the more commonly used historical waves approach. Prosperity theology, or the gospel of wealth and health, has often been painted with a one-sided and negative brush, even in academic conversations. Your typology, grounded in South African experiences, makes it evident that there is no one prosperity theology, but multiple theologies that inform and enact different kinds of relationships between finances and faith, between money and God. Perhaps more importantly still, your work shows that there's nothing exceptional, let alone one-sidedly malicious, about Pentecostal theologies of prosperity, but that much like other theological constructs that inform the lives of millions of people, these theologies are living and fluid ways of making sense of the world, the human and the divine. These theologies and economic practices linked to them are not only good and life-affirming, but they are also not only bad and destructive. And most importantly, they make sense to millions of people, whether we agree or not. This brings me to my last point, the one that I perhaps most appreciate about your work as an academic and your way of being in the world. This point was written all over your lecture today as well, the aim to understand the human being. You began the lecture by describing the struggle that led you as an Anglican to studying Pentecostalism. How could you understand these people who find God in loud noise, in mega churches, and in promises of healing? You later spoke of your more recent struggles to understand the newer forms of Pentecostalism. What to think about money practices in prophetic Pentecostal churches when they seem to support economic structures that disadvantage the poor? As you said, some of these churches have become well known in South Africa through media that has reported on the more extreme practices, like drinking petrol or eating grass. In your quest to understand the human being, you don't shy away from offering critical analysis of what's happening, but the edge of your work is in making sense of the world from the perspective of people of faith who make up these communities. This, I believe, is increasingly important in the world today, and your more recent aim to understand prophetic Pentecostalism, including faith communities whose ways of being in the world fly in the face of middle-class academic sensitivities, is telling of the power that lies in your academic project. Understanding does, of course, not mean accepting or promoting a particular kind of theology or practice. But it's hard or impossible to relate to those different from us respectfully if we do not first strive to understand. In the context of decolonizing academia, it's pertinent that we take other ways of being seriously enough to want to understand them, even if we then enter into critical dialogue with what we think we understood. Understanding the human being. I'm sure that many of us sitting here today, be it colleagues, students, family, know that you bring this disposition not only into your academic work, but into all your relationships. And today, as we first and foremost celebrate you as the leading scholar of Pentecostalism that you are, we also celebrate you as the human being in community.
I have the privilege to put on the hat. Prof. Maria. So earlier this evening, I spoke about the characteristics of an intellectual. And of course, we saw it in action. We saw that Prof. Maria was able to do a critical, rigorous analysis of the context and the situation. We saw, even though she didn't say it, but she exhibited it, that she views being an intellectual as a vocation. And we also saw, remarkably, how she was able to make connections that are otherwise hidden. And for me, it was fascinating listening to bringing gender, politics, and prosperity together in the typology also that you have. And also important, making sense within context was for me a key also of what you said. And let me echo here what Prof. Hanikola said about understanding, and this is also how I got to know you. And I must say, Maria, on a personal level, I had the privilege to work very closely with Maria over 2 years, and it was really, really a privilege. We had some nice conversations, not always about work, and those conversations also enriched me personally. So congratulations, Maria. Wishing you all of the best with the future, and we're looking forward to seeing your work develop even more. Congratulations. And now, dear guests, we have the privilege also to celebrate together with Maria. So we invite you next door to have some refreshments and some lively conversation. Good night.